Hi, I'm Mike McCrory, and this is Would You Make It? As soon as I got this drill press home from the store, I assembled it and immediately upgraded it with an auxiliary table and a fence. That was a number of years ago. These have served me well, but they no longer cut it, or should I say, drill it. It's time to upgrade. I want to be able to drill with accuracy, precision, and repeatability. And for that, I need a full-featured table and a fence. Let's go build it. Today we're going to build a new auxiliary table for the drill press. It's going to have a number of features. The first is that it's going to be larger. That's kind of a no-brainer. The current table is limited because it can rotate only along this axis. So the new table will also be able to rotate along this axis so that I can drill compound angles. The new table will also, like many tables, have T-tracks, but this one will have T-tracks not only in this direction but also in this direction. And that will give me the ability to rotate the fence 90 degrees when needed. So let's get started. I'm going to use 3/4 inch MDF for this project. The advantages of MDF are that it stays very flat throughout its life. It's quite easy to work with, and it's inexpensive. The disadvantage is that MDF doesn't hold screws as well as plywood does, so I'll need to use care when tightening the clamps into the T-tracks. The table will be 22 inches wide by 18 inches deep. The table will use 3 pieces, 2 that are laminated together to form a 1.5 inch thick top surface, and 1 piece that will serve as the bottom section. I will basically need a half sheet of MDF. 3/4 of that will be used for the table, and the remaining piece will be used to make the fence. Now, you want to avoid MDF dust as much as possible, so I'm going to wear a dust mask and use a vacuum system attached to my circular saw. Okay, I used my crosscut sled on the table saw to cut the 3 sections, or the 3 pieces that are going to form the table. I cut them a little bit oversized because the top 2 boards I'm going to glue together to laminate them to be 1.5 inches. So if there's any overhang as a result of the glue up, I'll be able to trim that off and cut them to exactly 22 inches by 18 inches. Alright, I'm going to use contact cement to laminate the 2 pieces of MDF together. Contact cement is a good choice for this because it has a low moisture content. So I'm going to apply an even coat to both pieces, and I'll just spread it with a trowel. So now it's time for a coffee. Come back in 15 to 20 minutes. While I'm waiting for the contact cement to dry, I can go ahead and cut the plastic laminate. This is going to be used for the top surface so that it's well protected and smooth for moving materials on. So I'll go ahead and cut it. I've marked it oversized by about 1/2 inch. Once I apply it to the tabletop surface, I'll be able to trim it with a router bit. Okay, so I've scored it, and now it'll just snap off. There we go. Nice clean cut, no chips. It's a lot better than cutting it on the saw. Okay, the 2 top pieces are ready to be bonded together. The contact cement has dried enough. Now, you only get 1 shot at this, so to make sure that you don't make any mistake, a good practice is to put some strips of wood. These are just some scraps that I had in my bin. I'll put these across. Bring the other piece over, position it where I want. And then I can pull them out. There we go. Now, I'll just put a little bit of weight on this and let it sit for a little while. But it's really, it takes a full week for the glue to cure fully to get full strength. But it's ready to work with pretty quickly after this. While we're waiting for the glue to cure up, I've got a scrap piece of maple, and we're going to use this to join the top piece of the table to the bottom piece, and this will be used to adjust the angle with a little bolt that goes through it. So I'm going to cut a slot through it with my router using my homemade router table. So here we go. Hearing protection, vacuum. Okay, so we've got the slot. Now I'm going to drill a hole in the other end of the piece. Now I'm going to use my crosscut sled to cut the tabletop to size. Now normally when you're using a crosscut sled, you want to place the material at the back to prevent any tear out that you might get. But with MDF, that's not a concern. Now what I want to do is I want to place the material that I'm cutting up at the front, and my front is also square. The reason I want to do that is because I don't have an outfeed table to support the weight of the crosscut sled, and this is a big sled. I'll talk about that in another episode because I'm going to rebuild this and make it a lot better. So here we go. Cut the first edge just to make it square, and then we'll reference everything off that. Okay, once again I'm going to apply contact cement to the tabletop and then to the back of the laminate. Let it sit for 15 or 20 minutes until it's ready to be put together, and then I'll glue it up. One thing I didn't mention the first time around is I use compressed air to make sure that all the surfaces are dust-free before applying the glue. So here we go. Okay, we'll let that sit for 15-20 minutes, and then we'll come back and stick it together. All right, the glue is set up. It's dry enough that we can bond the laminate to the tabletop surface, to the MDF. We're going to use the same process as before, and just put some scrap wood, little sticks. Put the laminate on top. I'm going to start with the center. Just push it, make sure there's no air gaps. Push all the air out if there is any. You don't want to get it trapped. You have to make sure when you're running your hand along the edge that you don't cut yourself, because this laminate is pretty sharp right now. All right, that's good to go. It's all sealed. I'll let it sit for a little bit to cure a little bit, and then we'll take it over to the flush trim bit on the router table. Okay, we're back at the router table. I've got the flush trim bit installed, and we're ready to trim off all of the laminate that's overhanging the surface. All right, now we've got a pretty sharp edge, so I'll just finish that up with a hand plane. Now, before cutting anything into the tabletop, I want to make sure I know where everything goes. I like to lay it out with pencil on the board just to visualize it and make sure everything makes sense. So there's going to be T-tracks running in this direction, and each one of those is 4 inches from the edge. In the opposite direction, 90 degrees rotated, these T-tracks are 2 inches from the edge. Now, the center of the drill press table is right here, but the drill bit is back away from that. We're not drilling into the center of the tabletop. One of the reasons for that is we've got the post that's in the way. So if I push this all the way to the back, that's as far as I can go. So even then I cannot drill into the center. But I'm going to pull it up a little bit because I don't want the fence when it's going in this direction. I don't want it to be able to interfere with anything. It's actually good that we're not drilling into the center because I will be installing a sacrificial backer board that's replaceable. And you'll note that this one is round, and that has a lot of benefit because instead of having to pull up a rectangular or square sacrificial backer board and rotating it 90 degrees, I can rotate this infinitesimally as needed to make minor increments, and I'll get a lot more uses out of this sacrificial board. It's a little harder to make because it's round, but it's going to be a lot more valuable. I've drawn it to be rather large. It's 9 inches, I think, if I remember correctly. And the reason for that is we won't always have a small drill bit like this. If I've got a Forstner bit, a 2-inch Forstner bit, it's going to come pretty close to the edge. So we want to have a little bit of excess room on each side. So that's it. That's the layout. I've gone underneath the table and I've marked where these slots are. So I'll drill holes in the back and then I'll be able to attach bolts from underneath. So we're back at the router table, and this is the T-track that we're going to use. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut the T-tracks. There we go. A really nice tight fit, and just under the surface. Okay, when cutting, we're going to cut into the real piece now, and when using a router bit like this, there's only one place the dust can go, and that's straight out the channel, straight out the dado that we're cutting. So it's going to come right toward you while I'm filming this. Okay, first cut. I'll do the other side, then I'll adjust the fence a little bit to take off that hair, and I'll do those off camera. This is my makeshift circle jig. It's got a pin that is 4.5 inches from the outside edge of the router bit. So that's going to cut a 9-inch diameter hole in my base plate, or in the table. I've set the router bit depth to be just a hair over 3/4 of an inch. That way the sacrificial plate will fit inside but will not protrude above the surface of the table. All right, so I've drilled a 1/4 inch hole about 1/2 inch into the table. That's going to be the point around which the circle cutter pivots or rotates. So let's insert the pin. And we're going to go clockwise around the circle. So we'll give it a try. And there we have it, a perfect 9-inch circle. Now, I've gone ahead and modified my circle jig with a slot rather than a hole, and that way I can bring it in and cut multiple rounds. Eventually I'll do it by hand, but I don't want to take a risk that the router is going to pull out and go someplace that I don't intend it to go. And then I need this adjustable slot anyway for cutting the circle that's going to go inside the circle. Alright, so this is what I'm left with after using the circle jig. The circle jig does a great job until you get into the interior, and then you can't cut any smaller. So I'm going to do this freehand, but if I don't have anything to support the router, it's just going to fall in and it'll gouge out the bottom. I don't want that to happen. This is where having a CNC router would come in handy, but they're awfully expensive. So here's my solution. I'm going to put a couple of pieces of 1/2-inch plywood here. I'll run the router back and forth, shift it over, do the same, and that's going to work. Okay, it's time to cut the first sacrificial circle backer board. This time I've set the distance between the pivot point and the inside of the router bit to be the same as the radius of the inside of the circle that I just cut. Let's give it a try. They fit pretty well, very flush to the surface. Now when they fit that tightly, it's not that easy to get them out. You got to pry them out with a screwdriver or something. But one trick you can use is just insert some compressed air in the center hole and up it pops. I'm going to push it all the way back before the table is mounted. And I'm going to use my Forstner bit, a 5/8 bit, just to put a little hole halfway through so that I can insert my finger and rotate it easily. Otherwise it's a little tricky to rotate. So let's do that. And there we go. Now it's relatively easy. And I don't need to worry about using up that space in the center anyway, because remember, when I position this correctly, it's going to be about there. So really the drill bit's going to be toward the back all the time. So good. I'll do that on both sides, on all 4 of these, and then I'll be ready to insert the T-tracks as the next step. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is install the T-tracks. It's going to take a little bit of precise cutting because they're intersecting. And you can buy kits from Rockler to intersect T-tracks, but I don't think it's worth spending the money. They're pretty easy to cut using a chop saw. So I'll go ahead and do that. The measurements are pretty precise. It's exactly 4 inches. So 4 inches plus half of 3/4 would be 4 3/8. So that'll be the first set of pieces. I'll cut 4 of those, 1 for each corner. Okay, I'm at the miter saw, and one thing we have to be concerned with when cutting the T-track is making very precise cuts, because we have very limited areas and we have intersecting miter joints. So what I've done is I've installed this wood backer board on the side and on the bottom, and I've made 3 cuts. 1 at 45 degrees, 1 at 90 degrees, and 1 at 45 degrees in the other direction. By doing that, I can see exactly where the saw is going to cut. And it's a pretty simple matter from this point forward to just line up the T-track exactly where do I want to cut it and cut the joint. So for cutting the miters, they actually have to be pointed. I'm going to cut a 45 degree miter joint like I've already done here. And then there's a line in the center, and that's the midpoint where I'm going to cut in the other direction. So let's give it a try. The blade has a tendency to pull the work toward it. By clamping it, it's going to make sure that it stays still. And that gives me exactly the point that I wanted to get. Now well, the T-Track's all installed and it fits perfectly. I haven't screwed it in yet. I've actually drilled some additional screw holes because of the fact that the MDF does not hold the screws as well as plywood. So I've drilled additional screws. The reason I haven't screwed it in yet is because I also want to add a bead of CA glue behind the T-Track to help it to stick to the MDF. I think that will give it enough adhesion so that when I'm clamping things, it won't pull out. But before I do that, I'm going to drill some holes for some T-nuts to attach the bottom of the table. Okay, the bottom piece is installed. It's attached to the original base. And now it's time to install the piano hinge so that the bottom piece is attached to the top piece and so that it can be angled up. Okay, we'll take off just a small little bit with the router. There we go. Fits in nicely. And now the top, with this mortise stand, the top will lie flat against this surface. Now I'll drill little pilot holes for the screws. I've attached a piano hinge so that the top face of the drill press table can be tilted as much as possible. I've got an arm on each side, so just tighten the bolts and it'll be stable. The final thing to do is to screw in the T-Tracks. So I'm going to pre-drill all the holes, and then I will use some CA glue to make sure they're securely fastened. Okay, I have everything prepared ahead of time. I've got all the T-Tracks lined up and positioned correctly because you have to act pretty quickly with the CA glue. I've cleaned out all the grooves to make sure there's no debris inside. Got my screwdriver ready. I've got a mallet and a piece of wood so that I can hammer them down and get them positioned correctly. So let's get started. I'm starting with the longest pieces. These are the pieces that are going to bear the most force. Put some glue on the back. Tap it down. And screw it in. All right, the table is done, so let's give it a test run. Drilled through, lifted out, no tear out at all. And all I need to do now is rotate my base plate just a little bit, not even that much, for the next piece. So there you have it. Would you make it? So all we need now is a fence and a dust collection system to pull away the shavings. So tune into the next episode and I'll show you how I'm going to go about making that.